What that is conveying is there's a mismatch between my body language and my verbal usage of words that I'm using to convey what I'm saying. Anytime there's a mismatch between someone's verbal language and their nonverbal language, follow the body language. Reason being, people always, everybody's body wants to stay in a state of comfort. And
Mhm.
thus, the body always wants to tell the truth. It always wants to. When it deviates from the truth, it will perform some gesture to try to get itself back into a state of comfort.
Many people want to be leaders. Fewer understand what it really means to lead people well. So what separates the two? Welcome to the Lead with Purpose podcast with your host, Merv Jersek. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations with leaders who have been in the trenches and have stories to tell. They'll share their practical wisdom to help cut through the noise and get to the heart of leadership. So let's get started.
Hey, welcome again, leaders, to the Lead with Purpose podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the most overlooked, I believe, one of the most overlooked leadership skills, and that is the ability to read people. And through that, to be able to influence the outcome and to negotiate with confidence in any situation, whether you're leading a corporation or a nonprofit or even a volunteer team. My guest today is a friend that I met through the National Speakers Association, Dr. Greg Williams. He is a body language expert, a master negotiator, a best-selling author, and he's been an advisor and still advises major corporations such as Mercedes-Benz, Bank of America, Unilever, those sorts of corporations. Now, from what I know of Greg, he has spent decades studying what most of us as leaders miss in our leadership journey. That is watching for those things like the micro expressions, persuasive techniques, hidden signals that can make or break trust, that can undermine our influence or add to our influence and our overall leadership effectiveness. So, Dr. Greg Williams, welcome. And I'd love if you could just spend a couple of minutes introducing yourself to our audience.
Oh, sure. First of all, thank you, Merv. It's wonderful to be with you and those that are attending and or will see this in the future. Now, you just asked me to introduce myself, and I'm going to start right off into teaching mode, as it were.
Okay,
A
perfect.
lot of time, yeah, a lot of times as leaders, people may ask us a question that may be general. Tell us something about yourself,
Yeah.
as an example. My response is always, well, exactly what would you like to know? And the reason I ask that question is because I could tell you a world of things about myself and never hit the intended target per the question that you asked, per the information you were seeking. And
Perfect. Yeah.
thus, until I truly understand what it is that you want from me, per the question you posed, I should not truly try to answer that question. So, Merv, I'm going to toss this right back at you because we're going to go back and forth by giving examples as we engage also. What would you like to know about me in particular?
Well, maybe we'll just get into the Q&A because I really, from a leadership perspective, my audience is typically those who are up and coming leaders who are trying to, um, work on those little tweaks within their leadership experience that goes beyond the technical or the managerial. And the reason I really absolutely coveted your experience today was to be able to give my listeners an idea of what it really means to read the room, to understand body language, and to use that as leaders in the negotiating process. And in fact, let me begin it this way. Most people, most leaders that I know, think negotiation, they think high stakes. They think I'm going to be negotiating a contract price for my work or for my new car or that sort of thing. But I think I've heard you say that negotiation is actually a leadership skill that we must learn to practice daily. Can we start there?
Oh, we definitely can. And now I'm going to go to another learning mode.
Perfect.
I'm going to circle right back to the first question you asked and then come right back up to the leadership skills that you just mentioned a moment ago. And I'm going to do something in the process that we can also use such that we can become better communicators and understand more of what is being sought from us. Well,
Love
first of
it.
all, per my background, I have been a TV news contributor. It was actually one of the TV news contributor. TV news networks that actually branded me as a body language expert because I had a lot
Oh,
of expertise in negotiation, more than 30 plus years, negotiating in high stakes environments for governments, in some cases, corporations throughout the world. And when the TV network branded me as a body language expert, someone said, within NSA, as a matter of fact, well, gosh, accept it because you do know a lot about reading body language. And from then, I based more of I built my skills up on the negotiation and body language side such that one complements the other. Now, repeat the question that you just asked, and I'll
well,
tell you why I
the
asked
idea
it.
is that a lot of people think that negotiation really only applies in high stakes situations. But I think I've heard you say that we actually need to be practicing negotiation in some form or fashion on a daily basis.
Well, that's actually true. Pause for a moment. The reason I asked you to repeat that question was to see to what degree it might alter. We do communicate and we negotiate constantly in every activity that we engage in. And thus, there are times when we need to understand more how somebody's thought process has changed within the moment. Yes, my motto is you're always negotiating. What you do today impacts what occurs tomorrow. The little shrug that you give to someone today sends a silent, nonverbal meaning that, to the degree that the question has been asked, well, what do you think about this or what do you think about that? I don't know. Well, it can signal insecurity.
Yeah.
It can signal the fact that the question does not pose enough of your time warranted to actually address it, and thus you're not concerned about it. So one has to be very mindful of the environment that they're in, what they're signaling in that environment, because in today's environment, you cast an opinion, a perspective of who you are. Tomorrow, it may or may not change, but it will be altered based on how you engage today.
Well, you just reminded me of something. So often we ask someone, "How are you today?" and they go, "I'm fine." So a couple of things. Let me throw that to you in terms of how should I have asked the question, and if that question were given to me, how should I answer it?
Okay. First of all, it depends, and you will hear me say that a
Yeah.
million and one times, and that's usually my default answer. It depends. It depends on what you're trying to achieve in the environment, how you wish to be perceived, how you wish to position yourself per what is to come next, per why you're actually in the environment. So it really does depend. So I'll throw it right back at you. And by the way, there's something known as answering a question with a question in
Yep.
order to gain more insight and information. So, what would you help offer or seek to receive in the form of a question that you pose per positioning yourself?
So, Greg, I'm looking at you. You look like you're having a great time today. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. And I'm glad you said it shows. How did you come to that conclusion?
I'm just looking at your face. I'm just your
Ah,
Yeah, your demeanor is very inviting.
well, thank you very much. As a matter of fact, during Halloween, it used to be used to scare little kids, but I'm glad that it doesn't do so with you. So
Now
you
you
see
meant
how. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Bert.
no, no, you finish that and then I've got I want to follow up with.
Okay. So I was going to say, right away, you can sense that I'm an engaging individual. I'm one
Mhm.
that's, I don't take myself too seriously in the environment that we're in right now,
Yeah.
although I would cast a different demeanor, which goes back to what I was saying a moment ago about how you wish to be perceived. If I was in a more, let's say, stern, stringent environment, and you may have even noticed that the pace of my speech has slowed down as though I were in that environment.
Oh.
Also, my tonality slightly deepened from where I was speaking at what tone level before. So again, it depends on how you wish to cast yourself based
Yeah.
on the environment that you're in. That should decide to what degree you wish to be perceived one way or the other.
Well, and that's a great kind of lead into my next question because I spent over 40 years in a very highly technical industry, that of IT consulting. And, we take ourselves pretty logistically um, seriously. Like we have things to do and deadlines to meet. But why do so many of us technically strong individuals in leadership positions struggle so much with our ability to influence and persuade?
Well, sometimes it can be due from the logical aspect from which we think about things from a technical perspective, and thus not placing as much as we might possibly place on the emotional side. And one should always take note of how they are feeling when they're expressing themselves, such to make sure that they are, I'll say it again, projecting the right image that they wish others to perceive.
Right.
So, I, you spoke about IT, so I'm going to go back to when it was called data processing.
Yeah, there you
Excuse me. And I owned an information technology consulting firm many, many, many years ago. And the one thing that we knew was there were some consultants that you just could not put in the front office of a client's environment.
right.
Put them in the back office or something of that nature, and they were fantastic. But once they had to interact with folks, you knew you might have challenges or even problems. And thus, go back to what I said a moment ago, understand who you are, even to the degree as a leader that you're dealing with individuals that process information one way versus another, even to the degree that they lean more right than left as far as their thought processes,
Mm,
et cetera, et cetera. And when I say right or left, I mean left meaning logical thought process versus emotional processes. I am a very empathic individual, and I know that. And thus, there are environments that I've been in that I know I have to control it lest I be perceived as weak. Now,
ah,
when we negotiate, sometimes that projection of perception may work for you because if you're negotiating with someone that is of like mindedness, you want to make sure that you match their modality so that you have them perceive you as being just like them. And you know the old cliche people like people who are like themselves.
that's true.
Contrast that to a situation where either you're in a bullying, negotiating position with the opposition, thinking the only way they can win is if you lose or something of that nature. I will ride shotgun over my empathic side to make sure it never rears its head. And as a matter of fact, I will cast a different perception altogether, that being as stern as I have to be based on what I'm met with.
Boy, that's a lot to take in, even for a young person, just to be able to shift your focus, shift your perspective, and that sort as you're
And,
going
and,
along.
Merv, and Merv, we do it every day anyway.
That's
That
true.
that's the thing. We
That's
do it
true.
anyway every day. It controls us as opposed to us controlling it. We naturally do it. You know, someone makes us angry, and if we're not aware of the fact that they've triggered us, we go into a rage. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're doing it. Okay,
Yeah.
converse that or contrast that to somebody knows our trigger, wants to trigger us to make us go into that state of mind, and instead smiling and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, thank you for that feedback," or something of that nature. We control it.
Well, I'm going to give you a compliment that is earnest and heartfelt, Greg. And that is, I remember seeing you the very first time walk onto a stage dressed in a nice light colored suit. And in my mind, you commanded that room before you even opened your mouth.
Mm.
What's the secret behind that?
Well, it's the body language.
Okay.
For those that can see this, I'm slouching right now. That's conveying a completely different signal than if I was sitting up erect, talking to you in a very tonality or tone that actually conveys a sense of authority versus um, I am an authority figure. And you guys can hear
The
the
change.
difference in tonality. It's like, yeah, convince yourself of that type of thing. So it is to a great degree the way you convey your image, your presence. Even when someone does speak, and I know the question was, well, how can you convey that sense of confidence and authority before you even speak?
Yeah.
And I said, you do it through your body language gestures. You stand up erect. You
Hmm.
actually place your chest out and your shoulders back, and literally, and that says, "Hey, I'm here. Watch me, look at me. I have something to convey to you." The hands on the hips pose also is one of authority, can be one of authority
Yeah.
if it's not contrived. And we can
Yeah.
talk about body language gestures per that a little bit later on. But it all starts with just the way you walk out. And as you know, Merv, as a professional speaker, you pause when
Yes.
you walk to the point at which you're going to speak in a moment or two. And you let the audience take you in and you
Right.
take them in. And people are going, "What's happening?" in
Yeah.
their mind. And
I
then you start talking and you tell them what's happening. So, anyway,
well,
there's a long answer to a short question.
as opposed to how many people come in, get on stage and say, "Wow, isn't the weather great today?" And they, yeah, they, they just mess it up for themselves. But
Exactly.
I want to go back to when I was a project manager dealing with IT. We had meetings all the time. I mean, I just got so tired of meetings, especially the ones that could have been handled with an email. But
Mhm.
regardless of that, one of the things that I learned to do is to start to look at people's demeanor, their posture, that sort of thing during meetings. And I want to know, what is the first thing that you notice, and perhaps you could train us to notice when we first enter a room of either peers or even people we don't know.
I will usually take note if I'm not the first person in the room, and dependent upon if I'm in a client environment that has brought me in to actually assist their negotiation team or lead their negotiation team, I'll be the first in the room or the last in the room. And the reason I take either position is if I'm the first in the room, I want to observe who comes in, and we talked about the demeanor that one's body language projects as they're entering a room. I
Yeah.
want to observe that particular body language gestures that those signals are sending. Who's communicating with whom to see to what degree there's interaction with the perceived leader versus someone that may be a facade as a leader, because I'm gathering information to
Yeah.
determine how I'm going to position myself in that particular environment. Now, in a negotiation, in a meeting, prior to the meeting, you should have gathered information about who's going to be there, what they want, why they want it, who's aligned with whom, et cetera, et cetera. That should
Mhm.
already be information that you had before you entered the environment. You then seek to confirm it by individuals that are walking into the room, who's, again, gathering with whom, what the discussion might
Yeah.
actually be about. And if someone says, "Well, I think this is going to turn out to be a great session," and the other person says, "I don't know, this may turn out to be tougher than we think." That person that said the latter may end up being the person that's most likely of authority, because a
Oh,
junior person's not going to say that to
yeah.
an authority figure. And thus, again, you've gained some additional insight and information. Let's reverse the script and talk about if I walk in the room last. I do that in some situations such that, again, people notice my presence. I want to see who actually notices my presence first and who follows their lead as a result of that individual looking in my direction.
Mhm.
That gives me insight per who may possibly be leading or who led at that moment. And leadership changes based on what we do, how we do it, when we do it, with whom we do it. And that will give me additional information per who I can initially tap to find out to what degree they are really the leader. When I say tap, I mean I'll pose a question to that individual and see who answers it instead, or to see who they might look at to either secure a better answer, to confirm their answer, or just pass on it altogether. So much insight and information goes on
Yeah.
just in those first few moments of either being the first in the room and observing who comes in, and or being the last in the room and observe what happens when you enter the room.
Well, and even the chair they choose to sit at,
Oh,
that's all of those things. But the
ca-
other thing that I became or trained myself to become keenly aware of is eye contact, posture, facial expression, and you've already referenced it a couple times, pacing when people are speaking. All of those, to me, I think, became very good clues as to how I should interact with that person or
uh,
those people.
Oh, definitely so. And may I just spin back for a moment to what you just said about even the seating arrangement?
Yeah.
My goodness gracious, that does carry a lot of weight per how someone thinks about themselves and or how their team has told them to think about themselves. The leader who sits in the middle seat on the opposition side of the table may be indicating, yes, I am the leader. The person that sits, let's say, slightly to the right or left of that position and has someone else sitting in it may be the real person in control. So you have to be observant as to, again,
Yeah.
the person sitting in the leader's chair says something and then looks at the person to their left or their right. Well, that person to the left or the right is the person that's really at that moment. That person that more than likely has either more information, more insight, or may be asked to lead at that moment.
Yeah.
So leaders can shift even though the title stays the same. And that's something to be observant of.
Well, and when I was again, when I was consulting, a lot of my leads, so I'd manage, I'd have leads in charge of different teams. A lot of my leads that come into meetings and they would grab the agenda and they would stick to they would spend their whole time worrying about the agenda while I'm looking around to see facial expressions and that sort of thing. But let me ask you this: what body language would you tell those young leaders as they look up from the agenda? What body language signals would tell them that someone is disengaged or resisting or withholding information, or what the kinds of things they should be watching for?
One moment. Let me just look at this. Yeah,
For
okay, you
for
put
my
that.
audience who is listening, Greg just mimicked what I did before. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I looked down as though I was distracted by something else or something of that nature. And here's where one can use silence in order to improve any position. So,
Good.
that person that you were commanding or seeking information from had tuned out for a few minutes or something of that nature. You don't say a word. Just let silence hang in the air. Then
Oh,
all of a sudden that person realizes, wait a minute, something's happening and I'm missing out on it. And the person looks up and you just maintain that eye contact, like, I'm waiting for you to answer my question. Meanwhile, the person doesn't know what the question was. And that's, truth be known, you can put people on the spot intentionally or unintentionally based on how you actually use that particular tactic, function to make sure that they pay attention
mhm.
going forward. And you could then say, so what are your thoughts about that? And they'll go, can you repeat the question or
Yeah,
something of that nature? And you basically call them out without really embarrassing them to the
yeah,
degree that you could have by saying, hey Joe, can you please pay attention? You don't
yeah,
want to go there, but at
yeah.
the same time, you want to let them know their attention is being sought and would be appreciated if it was maintained in the meeting.
Well, and one of the other things that became prevalent during my latter years of consulting and managing projects was the introduction of electronic devices into meetings. And people feigned that they were paying attention, and yet they were answering texts and doing that. Is there a particular technique that you would perhaps advise us on how to make sure that sort of thing does not occur?
Well, you can use humor.
Yeah.
So, for example, in one situation, if it occurs, you may say something along the lines of, "Oh, Joe, I see you're looking at that text. Don't forget to bring the milk, take the milk home also," or something of that nature. Or you could be a little more stern. Joe, we can wait until you finish that. Again, what
Uh,
do you want to have occur as a result of what you say is
yeah.
what you should consider per how you're going to say it.
Yeah. You and I both know Darren LaCroix.
Mhm.
Darren would, he would, if a cell phone would go off, he'd stop and he'd go, would you hold my calls, please? So he
Yeah,
would use that sense of
ex
humor to yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's a way to lighten the mood also, like I said, while making sure that that person knows, "Uh-oh, I better start paying attention," without calling them out in a way that would embarrass them.
Right, yeah. Now, we had talked about some of the negatives of body language and noticing them, but there are also some, in my mind anyway, some very subtle signs of confidence being secure in your own skin as a leader. When you walk into a room, how do you pick those people out and how do you focus on those people?
Well, let's say I've walked into the room, and as I indicated a moment ago, I'm going to watch who's observing whom, who's talking with whom, their body language gestures. For example, people can't see me right now, but I'm using hand gestures to speak. And that's something that we do naturally. If you try to speak while sitting on your hands, you'll find it difficult to continue sitting on your hands without doing some type of hand movement. So, to what degree are people constrained using hand movements when they're speaking? That gives you insight into the fact that they're being constrained by themselves per how they wish to communicate with whomever they're speaking and convey the sentiments that they are trying to send to that individual. So
Very
those are some of the things that you can watch. But let's talk about once you're in the room too, some of the
Yeah.
gestures to observe. Some of the gestures, again, can be, again, going back to the hand gestures. People will say, I believe in that. For those that can't see the gesture, I'm pointing as though I'm actually indicating the sincerity and the degree to which I'm actually believing in what I say. It doesn't necessarily have to be the truth, but I believe it to be the truth, and I'm trying to convince you of it also. There's another signal to be observant of, and that's when the forefinger and the thumb are placed tightly together. That's a sign of severe sincerity and belief in what one is saying. They're
Okay.
driving the point home even more poignantly than if they're just pointing to say, I believe, and pointing at the opposition or the individual or group to which they're speaking. That's yet another thing to be observant of. How about when someone says, now listen to the tonality, and I'll tell
Yeah.
those those listeners that are not viewing this, I'm going to say, I truly believe what I'm saying is the fact of reality. Now, I said that with authority, but for those that did not see my gesture, I was backing away. I'm sitting in a chair, but I was backing away as I was speaking. What that is conveying is there's a mismatch between my body language and my verbal usage of words that I'm using to convey what I'm saying. Anytime there's a mismatch between someone's verbal language and their nonverbal language, follow the body language. Reason being, people always, everybody's body wants to stay in a state of comfort. And
Mhm.
thus, the body always wants to tell the truth. It always wants to. When it deviates from the truth, it will perform some gesture to try to get itself back into a state of comfort. We come in the world with two fears, and only two fears: fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. You make a loud noise in front of a baby, and the baby will flinch. If
Yeah.
you're holding a baby and you slightly move your arms or hands downward, the baby and will all of a sudden flinch also because there's a fear factor that naturally kicks in. The body always wants to stay in a state of comfort. And when it is out of that state, the body will execute some maneuver to put itself back into that state. And those are the little cues that you look for to tell when someone may be not telling the whole truth, as it were, or challenging them to find out to what degree they believe it to be the truth.
That's the first time I've had that explained so clearly. Now it makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Is that what you would call those micro expressions? I've seen you use that. Is that are those micro expressions?
Well, micro expressions are displays of emotion
Okay.
that are shown that last for 1/4, in most cases, of a second. And they're facial expressions.
Ah.
So they are fear, anger, disgust, surprise, contempt, happiness, and sadness. And somebody may say, I believe that. Now, for those that did not see the gesture that I just emitted, I turned the corner of my mouth up. One corner, it could be either corner. And basically that says I have contempt for what I really believe, even
Interesting.
though the word said I believe that.
Yeah.
Again, I spoke about the gesture of pulling away a moment ago as someone was saying, yes, I believe that point, et cetera, et cetera. Suppose someone said the exact same words, I believe that, and at the same time I just displayed a sense of disgust,
Yeah.
which is the nose, excuse me, acting as though it just smelled something foul. It crunched up.
Yeah.
Okay, again, you received a body language gesture that differed from the words. Follow the body language because,
Mhm.
and with micro expressions in particular, one will commit those expressions before the brain has a chance to actually curtail the display that is shown. And thus, those are real expressions in the moment per how someone is feeling. Now, sidebar real fast. Those that know how to use such gestures in a negotiation can contrive those same gestures to send signals, mixed signals, in order to confuse the opposition. And you go, but wait a minute, you just said a moment ago that they were expressions displayed before the brain had a chance to filter them. And that is true when they are real.
Uh,
When they're contrived, I can do that and I can even exaggerate it, which lasted a little longer than a quarter of a second that
yeah.
time for those that are not viewing this. And again, it's a signal that, wait a minute now, I saw something different than what I heard, and you would just still follow up. Do you really believe that?
Perfect.
And have that person give further explanation per what you saw, what you sensed, and go from there.
I'm gonna have to listen to this podcast myself a few times because you're
Oh,
giving
Merv.
us a lot of information. That's great. Yeah, and a lot of my listeners are mid-level managers, and they want to excel in their leadership authority, their leadership ability, but also they find themselves in a situation where they have to influence peers who they are not direct authority over, or their own boss. They have to be able to influence them. So, how does body language, negotiation skills, all of that help them to succeed in those situations?
Ah, excellent question. First of all, understand what that individual needs or wants from you. And that really is ground one, because every one of us has some form of value to other individuals. It increases or decreases based on the situation. So
Mhm.
understand the situation that you're in, understand what the individual wants or needs from you, and try to assess how you can best give it to them such that they will help you help them. And in so doing, you help yourself.
Yeah. Let's just change the trajectory of this conversation just a little bit and go to situations where they may be unpleasant. And you wrote a book. I'm trying to think. It's is it negotiating with a bully? Is that what I said? And to me, that's such a powerful concept because I've been in very antagonistic situations, in those IT situations. So, how should leaders handle, let me put it this way, intimidating personalities without becoming intimidated themselves?
Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning the book. I wrote that book, my gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago, and it's still carrying worldwide weight. To
Nice.
answer your question, it depends.
I'm a consultant too. I know the word. It depends.
Yeah, exactly. And create two different scenarios.
Yeah.
One being the individual with whom you're negotiating is actually a real bully type, meaning that's their real demeanor.
Mm.
Even though they may be your superior, you have to assess to what degree you want to let them push you around. Because in a bullying situation, the bully will push you around to the degree that they can, to the degree that you allow them to. You can quietly, even if it's a superior, tell that individual in a private environment, "Uh, Mr. Joe, I appreciate what you said in the meeting. I perceived it as being a little harsh. What was your perception? Oh, that's the way I talk to everybody. Okay, okay. Well, what were you trying to convey to me through your body language, through the words you used? I was trying to convey that I want you to do what I say, and that's the end of the conversation, damn it. Do you have anything else to say? If so, I'll tell you what it is. If you're dealing with that type of individual and you are a subordinate,
Uh-huh.
to the degree that you may want to get out of that environment.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's some environments, depending upon your power level in um, contrast to those that you're dealing with, you may not, that may not be the best environment for you, and you may not survive in that environment.
Right.
Let's take an opposition approach to that, being that same individual, but one that's open minded. Oh, well, that's not what I was trying to convey at all. Now, you even noticed a slight tonality shift,
Yeah,
lightening my
I did.
voice.
I did.
Yeah, so that individual is saying, you know what? Thank you for letting me know that. And truth be known, leaders that want to bully people into action will one day have others amass against them, and their leadership tenure will be over.
Mhm.
Again, you're always negotiating. So, two different scenarios. The latter one being a bully type that did not intend to be and will modify their stance and
Yeah.
position as they engage with you in the future. And they may go as far as to say, thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah.
That's someone that I truly want to stay close to as my superior, because I know that individual is willing to change based on the environment that he or she is in and wants to be more of a open and approachable type of leader.
Yeah. Well, as our time winds down, Greg, I'd like to kind of give a couple of things that every young leader could take away from this particular conversation. And one is there a negotiation skill that you might recommend to every young leader that they could start practicing immediately to use in their profession or their volunteer organizations?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there are a few, but I'm just going to go to one or two. Number
Okay.
one, it goes right back to what I was saying a moment ago. You're always negotiating. Recognize that fact. Take note of how you feel in any particular situation,
Mm,
because taking note of how you feel in a situation will make you become more attuned to your body language and how it's speaking for you, even when silence comes from you. The fact that you recognize that you're always negotiating means you can prepare better for how you're going to engage in any situation before doing so, and how you're going to adjust in that situation if things do not go according to how you had planned for them to go. So, two things: always be aware of how you feel in a situation, and sometimes you can do mock situations to put yourself in a simulated state
mhm.
and thus determine how you're going to react in those positions, and be very much aware of what triggers you to perform an action versus a different action, and if the action that you would have performed when being triggered does not serve you, ride shotgun over it. Do not let it surface in a meeting.
Yeah. I think my last 5 guests have all come around to some form of emotional intelligence, and you just hit the biggest one, that was self-awareness, and that
Mhm.
I appreciate that very much, thank you. So, I like to end these, Greg, these situations with some quick, cute questions and answers where, we kinda go back and forth real quick because it also brings out more of the personality and more of just sometimes it actually uncovers more interesting segments. So, are you prepared to help me with this?
Hey, anything you need, Merv, you
Uh,
got.
all right. So let me ask you this. What's the biggest negotiation myth?
Ah, first of all, I didn't really answer your question. I said anything you need, you got. I didn't say I'd give it to you.
Oh, okay.
That's a myth.
See, I
So
took it the other way.
yeah, yeah. So the myth is you have to answer every question that's posed to you in a negotiation. That's number one. Number two, the fact that you have value when you're negotiating with someone, which is why you're actually negotiating with someone. So just because someone is a senior to you or have more revenues, more uh, advantages than you do, does not mean you should lower yourself to a much lower standard. They
Yeah.
sense and see value in you. Recognize that value in yourself per what they are looking for from you, and don't just discount yourself because you're in a lower position.
That's great. From Greg's perspective, what body language signal do you like to emote, perhaps, that shows you are confident in the situation you're in?
Smiling.
Ah, I like that. Yes.
Mhm. It also makes people wonder, especially if you're in an environment that's fraught with anxiety and you're just smiling, people go, "What in the world is going on in his head?"
You know,
Sad.
not to denigrate my government clients because I love them, but
Mhm.
my goodness, a smile really helps some of my peers in the government circles. I really appreciate the work they do, and it's just thankless sometimes.
Oh, and you know what? I'll tell you something also. Speaking of government work,
Yeah.
I do work with some of the U.S. Agencies that has three letters, and
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. And that's one thing that I just said a moment ago about smiling. It really does cast one in a much more pleasant demeanor than a frown or someone trying to play a tough role. Even if you're trying to play a tough role, a
Right.
smile a lot
Yeah.
of times will make people go, and when they go into that, query type of thought process, they're giving you information even then through their silence.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do one more and then we'll kind of close this off. But g- give my audience one daily habit that will help young leaders, even seasoned leaders, sharpen their ability to influence those around them.
It goes back again to paying attention to the fact that you're always negotiating and becoming more cognizant of the fact that you are negotiating, and think about the morning when you get up, what type of situations you might enter into. And if you practice on a daily basis how you're going to address those situations, what you might say, what counters you might make, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, not only will you become a much better negotiator, you'll also become a much better leader. People will start to think of you as, wow, this person thinks quickly on their feet, number one, and number two, boy, do they ever come up with some great ideas. Meanwhile, you've already thought about these things and you're prepared. And preparedness always meets opportunity.
Oh, that's great. And for my listeners today, I hope one of the things, well, several of the things you can take away today, I'm hoping that you're thinking that leadership isn't just about what comes out of your mouth, but it's about what people feel when they're around you. So today, Greg, I know you reminded us that every leader is negotiating every single day for something, whether for trust or for alignment or for commitment or for influence or for something. But at this point, Greg, where can people find you if they want to connect or learn more about what you offer?
Well, thank you for that question too, because I love to give away stuff. And I have website, themasternegotiator.com,
Mhm.
in which you go to the blog section. There is tons of free information there. Even more so, I'm coming out with a new course somewhere in the September, October timeframe that will introduce a new negotiation architecture. It's called the Williams Negotiation Architecture. Uh, it may be based on my last name. Some people
Maybe,
think so, but
maybe.
nevertheless, it talks about Greg, Greg, greatest recognition of every goal, gain, GAIN, greatest area for integrative negotiation, and tempo, timing and execution model for practical outcomes. If you'd like to get on the wait list for that, go to themasternegotiator.com WNA. And WNA is in small letters. And please feel free to reach out to me via email at Greg, at themasternegotiator.com. I love helping people, and I'd love to help you too.
I know you do. In fact, I may just get on your website the minute that this closes. Well, whether you lead in business or ministry or government or nonprofits or volunteer organization, any leadership area, I think your ability to read people, to manage emotions, to communicate with intentionality can absolutely, completely change your effectiveness as a leader. So, Greg, this was packed with wisdom. And thank you for joining us on Lead with Purpose. And to our
Thank you
listeners,
also, Merv. And one thing I just want to say before we close real fast, I've known you for quite a number of years.
yes.
I've always known you to be someone that has been sincere with the information that you give, very open to giving that information, and you give it from the heart. I appreciate you so much for the value add you provide to the world. Just
Well,
wanted to say
and I appreciate you calling that out. Thank you for that.
that.
And,
You're welcome.
and so, as we close, to our listeners, let's lead smarter, not harder. Pay attention to what people are saying and what they're not saying, because great leaders don't just hear words, they read the room, they read the gestures. We'll see you next time as we lead with purpose.
If today's conversation added value, make sure you subscribe. And if this episode resonated, please leave a quick review to help other leaders discover the show. And remember, leadership works best when you put people first. Let's lead with purpose, together.